Welcome everyone to New Milford, the greatest of all towns. An acronym that is used that was used this weekend in the Goat Days. It's an annual festival that is essentially a de facto celebration of everything that is New Milford, and it's kind of taken over some of the events that have taken place over the course of this town. And it's a major focal point for the community to get together and to get behind. And I think the event really highlights what makes this town, and what makes it so that the folks that have lived here all our lives and who say that it's the greatest of all towns genuinely mean it. And that's where we're going to start off our show tonight. But before we do that, we're going to get through just a little bit of housekeeping. This is something of an impromptu stream, so we're going to be a little bit more laid back and relaxed. I don't have as detailed a notes as I normally do, so we will get to your live Q&A at the end of the show, but this may only be about 30 or 45 minutes. We are going to get to tomorrow's budget referendum, as this show is effectively is intended to be a de facto segue into tomorrow's referendum from what we've experienced over the course of this weekend, which, again, if you're looking for some hour and 20-minute long expose with deep detail and lots of sources to go into that, this isn't going to be the show. This is going to be a lot more informal, and hopefully it will lead us nicely into tomorrow's referendum. And I said I wanted to start with the Goat Days because I genuinely believe that this is, here in New Milford, the greatest of all towns. And like I said, the event of the Goat Days, and I was there, and I was running the Lions Club booth the entire weekend, except for the last half hour or so of Sunday, is emblematic, I think, of the spirit of this town. The AGs run this. They're from New Milford. They have a farm in New Milford, known for its farming history, and they set up this basically gigantic nonprofit event to be, again, a celebration of all things New Milford. And with, of course, a charitable end as part of this endeavor, which is that all of the money that they raise, all of the excess funds that they raise, they don't put that in their pockets. That goes straight back into the community in some directly charitable manner. And so I want to start off tonight's show just reminding folks just why it is that those who say we love this town do in fact love this town. So let's start with just some photos for those of you who missed out. This is from the Goat Days page itself. And again, one of these things that you're going to see is you might recognize some of the people in these photos. You might recognize some of the vendors because almost all of the vendors are from New Milford. Almost all of them. I'm not going to say necessarily all of them because I don't know them all off the top of my head, but this is just a great, fun thing to have happen. This has been something that I've been participating in with the Lions Club for years now. There are those who have said that it's now supplanted the fair days, and quite frankly, so be it. So be it. We got a nice post from. Okay, this is some more from the Goat Days page, so you guys can see the carnival rides that were there and all the good fun. That's a basically kid and family-oriented event. We got some really nice aerial photos from Tom Allen, who does some of the best aerial photography in town. And yeah, so you're going to see some of this stuff shared throughout. This is just some really nice aerial photography. I honestly don't understand how Tom manages to break through Facebook's compression algorithm, which is generally speaking not very good. And so you guys can get a good bird's eye view of the entire event, taking over most of Young's Field, and with excellent foot traffic on Saturday and on Sunday, despite the weather not being as perfect as it has been in the past. There was also fireworks at the event for, as far as I can tell, the first time. I was exhausted on Friday, and when the thing was over, I had to go to bed. So I mostly just went to my office, took care of some business, and then went to bed, and I missed the fireworks, which is a shame because I love fireworks. I love fireworks, and apparently it was a really splendid show. Despite the weather, there was a vendor there that was right next to us, the Sandcastle vendor, Create a Castle, who's from New Milford, and this castle survived the entire weekend despite the storms. So yeah, this is from Mayor Bass's page. We got some great photos, and at the end of this is Lion Jack here from the New Milford's Club, towing some kiddos in our Lions train, which will be back at the at the Memorial Day Parade on Monday, which is the Memorial Day itself. I have to look at the number. That is the 26th of this month. So you'll see that again. You'll see that throughout the course of the summer and into the fall with some more events here in New Milford. And, this is just a perfect example of the community getting together here. In the background, you can see the New Milford Police, who, I spoke with and were really cool about putting together this video with us that we threw together that we thought would be just a fun bit of silliness between the New Milford Lions Club and the police department. Enjoy.
Probably hated it. Use a taser.
So we just had a little bit of fun. A special shout out to our, the boys in blue here in New Milford for having a little fun with us over at the Lions Club over all this. And yeah, I swear after that, I wasn't going to drive. I won't drive quite so fast around the event. And so that's just a great demonstration piece of the entire community getting together. Ray Lillis being a decent fellow. I'll name drop him because we were kind of tight with our volunteership with the Lions Club, and Ray came and drove the train for the last hour and a half for us on Saturday while I manned the booth, and the two of us managed to get a whole bunch of kiddos, a whole bunch of rides. And that was Ray at the end telling the officer to tase me. And it's just a little bit of light-spirited fun that this community has always been centered on. It's always been capable of engaging in. Now, of course, the proverbial other side is going to use this video against me. They're going to say, oh, this is not taking, policing seriously or something along those lines yet because a police car drove 35 feet and flashed its lights and went, wee, 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 and had a little fun getting together at the Goat Days. This is the joking spirit. This is, again, the heart and soul and spirit of this community, and it will be used against me specifically in bad faith by the proverbial other side. Now, I'm not here to cause divisiveness, but those who would use something as obviously tepid as that, something as obviously just innocuous, a joke as that, it's just not in keeping with the spirit of this town. And it's that rejection of good faith interpretation of this sort of thing that is the divisive act. And you will see it play out. I promise it will be used against us, against me specifically, in bad faith, in direct rejection of the spirit of community that has fundamentally built this town and is why, again, the people in this town that say this is the greatest of all towns and mean it actually mean it, and why they say it. This whole thing is a great getting together of the community. And it's one of the reasons why when I refer to the DTC leadership, for example, or the proverbial other side, I'm talking about the proverbial other side. Not that somebody is, or the proverbial opposition, not that somebody is in and of themselves existentially opposed to me, to my breathing, right? It's that it's a proverbial opposition. When there is a debate issue, when there is a topic over which there might be some debate, there are always going to be at least two sides to that debate. Primarily, the nature of human beings being somewhat tribalistic is for two tribes to emerge, for things to coalesce around 2 points on any debate topic, right? Here in town, what's the correct New York baseball team to root for? Well, obviously there are only two options, but if you're talking about fandoms here in New Milford of even just baseball teams, you're going to find almost everyone is either a Mets or a Yankees fan, with a smattering of Red Sox fans. And it is, speaking, of course, it is geographical, right? Like the tribalism that takes place within baseball here in New Milford is geographical, but it is necessarily polar. As in there's going to be just two points that people are going to, generally speaking, coalesce around. So the fans of I don't know if there are any, the Tampa Bay Rays. I know there are a handful of fans of the Phillies. The Phillies fans are going to coalesce probably with the Yankees, and the Boston Red Sox fans are going to coalesce probably more or less with the Mets when it comes to this decision of Mets versus Yankees. And so this is why I always am very careful with my language to say the proverbial opposition, like with this budget referendum. There is the proverbial opposition because it's an opposition along the lines of this debate. It's an opposition as a matter of principle and not as a matter of existential, some sort of existential philosophical approach to somebody's mere breathing, right? So a good faith and charitable interpretation of these sorts of things is to look at them from the perspective of the issues. I believe that this community, broadly speaking, can be the spirit defined by the spirit of adults can disagree on politics. There's no reason that two adults can't just simply disagree on politics. And I don't think that a political position is something that necessarily utterly defines someone's mere existence. Now, there are very few people in this town that aren't good faith actors and don't abide by that core and defining spirit of this town. And they will say that if I say something like gravity exists, they will take the opposite position because Mike bad. And I don't mean just like Republican or Democrat or, in my case, Libertarian bad. No, Mike Sennello specifically bad. And this is why I say when I talk about the proverbial opposition, when I talk about the leadership here in town, when it comes to political parties, I talk about the DTC leadership. This is an election year. We're going to get into that when this election season really starts to roll out. I do have some content that I'm already working on in that regards. But remember that what I talk about is the DTC leadership. I don't talk about Democrats in town as being something that is not representative of the spirit of this community. And this is why when it comes to national elections, this town is very split. When it comes to things like voting for the Congressional 5th District here in New Milford voted for Johanna Hayes twice. In 2020, New Milford voted for Joe Biden. Yet when it comes to the local politics, Mayor Bass wins landslide elections as a matter of routine, and the Republicans in this town win landslide elections as a matter of routine. That shouldn't happen. And the reason that shouldn't happen is because if the DTC leadership wasn't what it is, you'd have electable Democrat candidates. You'd have a DTC that is actually representative of Democrats in this town, who, again, there are people that came to me at the GOAT days and said, Mike, I watch your show. I generally speaking like it. Tomorrow I'll be voting no too low. And that's fine. Two people can disagree on politics. And this is why when I've been covering this, I've been covering the dishonesty of the proverbial opposition. And I'm hoping that people are going to be persuaded away from that broad dishonesty. And I hope that when it comes to the truth about what's happening with the origin of this, people will see the show that I put together last week and see the dishonesty that is at the core and heart of the so-called movement. Last week we talked about astroturfing. Last week we talked about bad faith action when it comes to what the thing is actually based on. And it's for this reason that I actually have to be somewhat delicate. Because on this proverbial side, if I'm not extremely particular and delicate about my language, then all hell breaks loose. But the proverbial other side has that machine behind them. Right? In this particular case, when it comes to this budget referendum. And this particular machine is what allows these people to engage with extreme dishonesty and engage in a way that, to me, is far from in keeping with the spirit of this town. And that's why I said on last week's show that I think when it comes to this budget referendum, there is a very, very quiet, utterly silent majority that would agree with what I've been talking about. And you guys have probably started to see our signs out. You know, the vote yes. The taxpayers are not ATMs. Those folks in town who have been treating the taxpayers as ATMs, I'm sorry, but that action, not the person, that action is disgusting. But this is the type of thing that you would expect when the whole thing is dishonest from the get-go. And it's the exact thing that you would expect from something like this. And it is a bloody shame that the organizers of the Goat Days had to put something out like this. The entire time I was at the Goat Days, my signs were in the backseat of my car. And 2 of those 3 days, I had the best parking spot in town. The best parking spot in town because I got there super early as a vendor so I could set up. Super early. My car, with a trunk full of vote yes signs, was 25 feet from the Goat Days, from the entrance to the Goat Days. And I never brought up my signs. I never wore any t-shirts or any paraphernalia. You know, when people came to me to talk politics, I tried to get away from that because I was running the Lions booth at the Goat Days. This whole event was supposed to be, again, a celebration of all of the wonderful things about this town and what makes this the greatest of all towns. For example, people getting together on a beautiful weekend and just having fun and allowing the kids to pet some goats, to pet some bunnies, to ride the Lions train, to eat some local fair food, to check out some vendors, to buy some toys from Nordica Toys, to buy some swords for your nephew so that you can have sword fights with your nephew and, you know, aggravate his mother like I did last year. So it is a crying shame, but it's also extremely expected of this movement that this is what we saw. So this is from the official New Milford Goat Days page. This is May 17th, so this was Saturday. I would like to address some issues that have been brought to our attention on a couple of Save Our School pages in town. We are evidently blocked from. This is what I've been talking about, guys. This is what I've been talking about. If this was an honest movement, if the Vote No Too Low cabal originated in honesty, then the Goat Days, at least, would not be blocked from this group. Instead, I'm blocked. They're blocked. Apparently, most of the town is blocked. Do you remember what I said about the spirit of this community and the spirit of this town? Do you remember what I said last week about how everything I do is out in the open in public? There's a reason for that. Because everything I do is honest. And if you are public about everything you do has to be honest or you get called out. If you go fly off the handle publicly on your YouTube channel, then somebody can use that video to, you know, make a response video with all kinds of poop emojis, let's say, and make a response that is silly and makes you kind of look foolish because it's exposing publicly, because of your public video originally, the truth about the issue. This is, I remember, I do all of this publicly. I share everything to your news and politics discussion page, which is a public page, and to my personal Michael Sennello page, which is a super public page. You don't even need a Facebook account to see everything I post. And yet even the Goat Days is blocked from this group, which is where all of this is originating from, which is where all of the astroturfing is coming from. New Milford Goat Days, Inc. is a 501c3 nonprofit set up to hold this event and contribute the proceeds to local nonprofits and those in need. While Goat Days is open to the public, it is a private event. We pay the town of New Milford to rent Young's Field. Those who attend are our guests and subject to our rules. We absolutely know how important the school budget is. However, we don't allow any soliciting, handouts, pamphlets, and the like from anyone. And you didn't see me doing any of that. I'm going to be the one that's blamed for spearheading the campaign to get this budget to pass. And against the trademark No Too Low crowd. And yet you did not see me soliciting any of that. When I talked to Pete Bass, I had a nice long conversation with him about the Mets. We talked baseball. That's all we talked about. We are focused on providing family fun, which is what the Lions Club was there for, to provide family fun, to give the kiddos rides. If you notice, there are no Republican or Democratic booths, no gutter guard, home improvement, no soliciting outside of their booths, no non-local anything. The only exceptions are a few companies that pay a very large sponsorship fee, This year, we are lucky to have two, T-Mobile and Distinct Storage. We are very grateful for their large donations. It will go a long way to help people in need in our town. Our largest donation this year will be to supply local scholarships for youth sports for those families that need help. Please come and enjoy. Please respect our rules. Thank you for your support and understanding. And the fact that they even had to release a post like that is disgusting. Utterly disgusting. It is utterly disgusting that if it's true, if it really did happen, it is a disgusting move. It is a pathetic move of the proverbial other side to be engaging like this. Because I 100% guarantee you it wasn't the vote yes crowd. I 100% guarantee it wasn't you guys. And I know that because you guys haven't been like ridiculous at these public events. I know it because you guys didn't come to the town meeting and spend however many hours just spewing out a fire hose of disinformation. In fact, I was the only one that went. I lone wolfed it. So I know you guys aren't the ones doing this. I know that if this pamphlet handing out is what's taking place, we all know where it came from. The only thing I handed out was a private business card because somebody came to me and said, I love seeing your landscaping work on your Facebook page. And for those who know, that's what I do for a living. There's no hiding the ball here. I've been very public of the fact that I run Western Connecticut Pro Turf. And I've been very public about our work too. So for those of you that are interested, yes, we are taking on more clients. We don't just mow lawns. We don't just make the grass short. We do hardscapes. We do bed work. We do design. We do installation. We do patios, walkways. If it's simple enough, I'll do some steps. And it's all on our Facebook page, Western CT Pro Turf. So for those who are interested, reach out. Go to our page first. And again, like I always do, I provide the receipts. Go to our page first. Check out the videos. Check out the before and after photos. And you can make a decision for yourself. But the point is that it is a clear indicator of what I've been saying from the get-go about the proverbial other side on this issue. It's something that if you guys have been following along, shouldn't surprise anyone. And again, in addition, like I said, this isn't me being divisive. Me revealing the truth is not me being divisive. You constantly making darn sure to use the phrase proverbial other side of this issue is not me being divisive. Those who would engage in this way, in this really disgusting way, those are the folks that are divisive. So are those that would do things like manipulate children toward this political movement and use the public school facility, direct facility, as part of a campaigning ground. This is on New Milford Positive Vibes, which has a strict rule against politics. Just like the New Milford, Wonderful page has a strict rule against politics. This is why you'll never see me share these videos on those pages. But for the record, I don't know who's running these pages, but if I were to do something like this, if I were to share this stream to those pages, it would get deleted immediately. My post would get deleted immediately. But here, let's read through this post. I'll be in the New Milford High School side lot, closest to Cumberland's, until 11 a.m. Come donate your bottles and cans to support the amazing kids on the band and guard programs. Every little bit helps. Thank you for your support. You would think, if this was good faith, you would think that this is all this is. There's no subversion taking place. Right? It's not like there's a ball being hidden here. It's not like we're trying to obscure something here. And then we scroll down to see the photo. And you can see on the right, New Milford High School Band and Guard bottle return drive. And then with the exact same yard sign, clip to that is Cuts Hurt Kids. Cuts hurt kids. This isn't just a figure of speech. This is part of the literature that the secret Save Our Schools crowd has been soliciting, has been sharing, has been producing. We've all seen it now. For those of you who have been following my show, you've seen it now. And we're going to now associate Cuts Hurt Kids with the New Milford High School Band and Guard bottle return drive. And you can see in the background, this is at New Milford High School. I'm sorry, but this is just not New Milford. This is just not representative of the greatest of all towns. This is something that the folks that have largely that come to me and said, Mike, I really appreciate what you're doing. I'm on your side. None of those people, I guarantee none of those people would have done something like this. None of them. You won't see any of my yard signs in New Milford High School. And in fact, if you do, take them. Take them. Get them out of New Milford High School. I don't want my yard signs anywhere. I don't want my yard signs on the school property. That's just disgusting. That's just a disgusting act. But it's, again, if the whole thing being steeped in an astroturfed, union-organized event, right? And steeped in dishonesty from the get-go, like we talked about last week, this is exactly the type of behavior you would expect. And again, me calling out this bad behavior is not me being divisive. The behavior itself, the divisive behavior, is the divisive behavior. The guy who's pointing to it isn't being divisive. In this case, just daylight is the disinfectant, not the infectant. And that's what I'm presenting. We talked about how the union was at the heart of all of this. We showed how this is an AstroTurf movement from the union. And that's why you're seeing so much of this literature and merchandise. And that's why you're seeing such a strong movement here in Milford. You're not going to see it in Brookfield. You're not going to see it in Sherman. You're not going to see it in Washington. You're not going to see it in Roxbury. The teachers union handpicked New Milford. We're one of the 3 or 4 towns that they handpicked for a union-based campaign to protect the teachers and to protect their jobs. That's it. That's it. They don't care about you. They don't care about you. They don't have the taxpayers' interest in mind. There is a direct monetary interest taking place here. They're not disinterested parties, as they claim to be. This is not about, saving our schools or educating the children. This is about keeping somebody's paycheck. That's it. That's it. And quite frankly, if my customers can't afford me, then I don't get their check. End of story. And I'm not going to go to a town council meeting and spread disinformation about my customer and just give a wanton disregard for my customer's interests about all of that. And here's the thing that's great about the free market. If I was to act like a complete a-hole like that, I would lose all my customers. I lost a customer this week, because he simply can't afford it. He's come on tough times, and he simply can't afford to pay somebody else to mow his lawn. And he's just going to figure something else out. And we, the taxpayers, simply can't afford a gigantic tax rate increase in a year where we've got a revaluation, and in a year where we now know that we're gonna owe $7.5 million toward a lawsuit. We know that now because we just had that town council meeting earlier this last week, which we're gonna go over in just a minute. But do you see me publicly disparaging this fellow? Do you see me even naming his name? Do you think that what I said in response was something utterly volatile? No. My response was something along the lines of, well, I'm sorry to hear when, if things start to look up a little bit, we'd love to get back to mowing your lawn. Free markets for the win again. The free market's breeding decency, enforcing decency. But again, when you have that union to protect you, you don't have to act with decency. And that's why we're seeing so much of this indecency taking place. And, this is why I talk about it, because you guys are coming to me. You guys are coming. I do this show for you guys. And like I said last week, the screenshots that I'm getting that allows us to publicize this information are screenshots that aren't coming from one person, two person, three. It's coming from all of you. And the same thing is true of the screenshots that I'm getting from you guys of the signs, which we're going to get into in a minute. But the question then becomes, who's not being transparent? Transparency is not having, an opaque wall that doesn't allow you to see through, to see what your true motivations are and to see what the truth is. I've never hid the fact that I'm behind these signs. I've never hid that fact. Now, I'm only behind it, and you guys are out there risking your necks, and sticking your necks out for me and for this movement, and for your own wallets, which I totally get as a taxpayer, by sticking those yard signs out in your property. There's a fella in town that owns the BMW place at the south end of town that, put one right outside of his extremely public business on Route 7. And, for that sort of act, I'm incredibly grateful that you guys have your necks out like this. But the question is now, who's not being transparent? I hide nothing. I have this show that you guys can all come to very publicly. And you guys can all see what it is that I want to talk about. You guys can see my intentions in real time. Those who are watching right now, you're seeing it in real time. So yeah, for those who have stuck their necks out, I really gotta show you my appreciation, and that's, kind of what I was trying to go towards. I'm gonna make sure go towards with this post right here. This is an appreciation post I just put out. I've been getting photos like these from folks who have taken the time to get these signs out. To everyone who has stuck their necks out and taken one of these signs, thank you so much. And I want to repeat this on the show. I'm doing this not because I'm showing that, look at me, I'm holier than thou. No, I'm doing this because I want to repeat this. I want those who haven't seen this message to get this message. Thank you. I'm instantly and eternally grateful. I can't describe how heartening it is to see the fruits of this effort bear out in real time. To everyone who has followed all of this and has the guts to defend the position of the taxpayers for a second time and now fourth time, thank you so much. I still have a few signs left, which isn't true anymore. Thanks to everyone. The signs are gone. Everyone, thank you so much. Salutes in the chat. To everyone who took a sign, they're gone. I'm all out of signs. Everyone who wanted one got one. Everyone who wanted a certain amount got exactly that amount, and they're out. Today is Mom's birthday. Yesterday was my mother's birthday, so I'll be streaming tomorrow night instead. So folks know, this was supposed to be last night, but it was Mom's birthday. So I dealt with goat days all day, and then I went and hung out with Mom for her birthday. Didn't have time to do a show. And so these are some of the photos I've cropped, to kind of protect everybody's information, But these are some of the photos you guys have been sharing with me, and for that I'm eternally grateful. For that you have my gratitude. And for those who are on the proverbial other side and are watching, thanks for watching. I really hope the video that folks on the proverbial other side who are going to potentially be voting no tomorrow, I really hope the video you watch is the video we did last week. Where, again, talking about being public, right here, live, the Mike Sennello Show, the propaganda machine revealed. It's on my YouTube channel right there. All you have to do is go to the live videos tab on the Captain Phoenix channel. For those who are watching on YouTube, thanks for watching on YouTube. I'm going to start trying to migrate to there. So for those who are watching on Facebook, Facebook long-term isn't a good place for me to be doing this, and we got to be moving over to YouTube. So for those who haven't seen it, I've cropped it. I've trimmed the video so it's a little bit more digestible. There it is on my YouTube channel. Facebook is now permanently deleting all live streams that are 30 days old. So in 30 days, this live stream will cease to exist on Facebook, and there's nothing anyone anywhere can do about that unless your name is Mark Zuckerberg, which mine isn't. So I have no control over that. So if you guys want to see my live streams, start migrating over time to my YouTube channel. If you guys could follow me on the YouTube channel and become subscribers, that would make this whole process a whole lot easier. But the point is, it's all there. It's all there. Although Facebook is going to delete all this stuff, it's all there on my YouTube channel for anyone to watch at any time. And for those who want to get an account with Google, if you have a Google account, if you have a Gmail account, you can comment on those videos. You can comment in the live commentary, in the live chat, as people may be doing right now. So again, just as a second thank you, I do the show for you guys. Right? I don't do this for me. I don't do this for money. I do this for you, for the folks in the community. And for those who are watching, for those who have participated in any of this. And anyway, for those who have just come to me and said, Mike, I can't take a sign. I'm in the wrong neighborhood. You know how the proverbial other side is. I can't do it. Right? But thank you. and I'm on your side. For those people who have just said something along those lines, thank you. Thank you. I don't have the protection of the machine behind me. And without that protection, I can't keep this up for very long. It's May. I've got to get back to landscaping. I'm losing tons of sleep over this because I won't let my politics interfere with my business. I won't do it. And unfortunately, the only way to juggle business and this show is to just lose sleep. It's like a triad, if you will, right? It's like the college triad where you can get three things: good grades, sleep, and intoxicated, right? And go to parties, basically. You can party, get good grades, or sleep. You can get any two of those three, but you can't get all three at any one time. And just like running the show and being this involved with the local politics and providing you guys this information, what I have to do is sacrifice sleep, and I can't do this. I can't lone wolf anymore, at the very least. So with that said, I think that there is a question when it comes to the strategy. When it comes to the strategy with these signs. So I'll just keep this up in the background so you guys can see it. Now that we're out of signs. This is the last sign that went out. So to the family that took this sign, they know who they are. Thank you so very much. I hope you guys get to see them while you're out. Remember that on the on Wednesday, after the referendum is done, if you don't have these things in your yard, pick them up. If you guys were some of the people that have been putting them out in like Route 7 and stuff, get the signs, get them off the side of the road. But I think it's important to explain the strategy. As you can see, the sign says, vote yes, the taxpayers aren't ATMs. There's a strategy to this. And that involves the fact that we are up against the proverbial machine. We are up against an incredibly well-funded, well-motivated, with absolute machine that has more than just monetary and material resources to keep this up indefinitely. So here's why we need to vote yes. And if you want to vote too high, that's what I'm voting. I'm voting yes too high on both. If we vote, if the thing just passes, we get the layer of protection. There's no second referendum. This thing doesn't go back to the Board of Finance. And after it goes back to the Board of Finance, if the town council decides they don't like what the Board of Finance did, the town council can technically intercede and do basically whatever it wants. And then from there, from the town council, it doesn't go back to the Board of Finance. It goes back to referendum. And if we have a second referendum, who knows what the results are going to be? If it goes back to the Board of Finance, who knows if the Board of Finance is going to have the guts to respond to what the actual voters say on Tuesday? Who knows if the town council is going to have the guts to not intercede? Because what history has shown is that when it comes to the Board of Education side of the budget, when it passes by very, very narrow margins. So this vote no crowd it's not going to take much to get the budget on the Board of Education side to fail. It's not going to take much. That is a hurdle they can overcome. The hurdle that they would then have to overcome is the advisory question. So tomorrow, when you vote, there's going to be 4 things for you to answer. It's a yes or no on the municipal side of the budget and a yes or no on the Board of Education side of the budget. And then there's 2 advisory questions. Is the municipal side too high, too low, or adequate? Is the Board of Ed side too low, too high, or adequate? And for those who are just saying, well, let's just vote too high. Again, we don't know what's going to happen on the other side of this if it does fail. What we get if it passes is going to represent the second lowest, because Washington had a budget that they took a very different approach to some of the other towns. But New Milford is mostly an outlier in this regard because we haven't had a reval. Washington had its reval. And because of that, the actual size of the grand list increased. And because the size of the grand list increased, the mill rate doesn't have to increase. So you can spend more and get away with not increasing the mill rate. So that's what happened in Washington. We haven't had a reval yet. The revals begins in July of this year, well after the referendum tomorrow. And we won't get the results of that reval until much later in the year, probably in the area of like October, November, December. But yeah, your home values are on paper, your home values, because it's only relevant if you actually sell your house. And if you love this town and don't want to move, you're not going to be selling your house if you don't absolutely have to, right? And you shouldn't have to. If you don't want to, you shouldn't have to. It's your property. You should be able to say, I love this town and want to stay here. And unfortunately, that reval is going to cause your taxes, in addition to the rate, to go up. So here in New Milford, if you vote yes, what we get out of it is an incredibly small mill rate increase, which is in response to the state statutes being amended to change how the towns are allowed to collect property taxes on vehicles. Now, I'm of the belief that towns shouldn't be allowed to collect property taxes at all on motor vehicles. But what that means is that here in New Milford, we have a decrease in revenue. We have a revenue source that has now shrunk. So there's only two things you can do. You can either raise revenues by raising taxes and tax rates, or lower expenses by simply spending, at least in relative terms, less. New Milford is the only town of the 169 that has taken, generally speaking, the approach of spend less. Generally speaking, taking the approach of we're not going to pitchfork the taxpayers, and we're instead going to focus on reducing expenses. And as a result, what we get out of this is basically the best of a bad situation in terms of our tax rates here in town. This is as good as it's going to get for all intents and purposes. And so that's what we get out of it if we vote yes. And what we're missing if we vote yes is the opportunity for the members of the Board of Finance to either not show up or not have the guts to respond to the advisory question the way that you guys intend to respond to the advisory question. Now, I talked about how the proverbial other side only has a very narrow hill to overcome, a very narrow hurdle to get the thing to fail on the Board of Ed side. However, on the advisory question, it's a mountain, because historically, the advisory question on the Board of Ed side has been too high over too low at a rate of 80 to 20 to 90 to 10. As in, it is way more than a supermajority that, generally speaking, vote in favor of too high. So that if the budget fails, ostensibly the Board of Finance would lower the total expenditures. Right? So it would be a reduction in the budget proposal. Not the budget itself, but the proposal. In response to the people, the taxpayers in this town. The legal voters in this town, beyond that. So the reason we need to vote yes is because it provides that layer of protection. If the advisory question comes back 60-40, which would be still very much an outlier in terms of the advisory question, in favor of too high, will the Board of Finance have the guts to say, well, the voters spoke? We're a town meeting form of government. We're as close as you're going to get in 2025 and in the first world to a direct democracy. The people spoke. They said it's too high. They voted no, and they said it's too high. So our job as the Board of Finance then is to lower it. It's to make the number smaller. Will the Board of Finance have the guts to do that? We don't know. I know that there are at least two members of the Board of Finance that absolutely would have the guts to do it. I don't know if they would have... Because again, you're up against, the machine. You're up against the machine that can get away with things that you and I here in the free market can't. And then on top of that, I have no idea what the town council would do if the Board of Finance said, well, the people spoke, we're going to lower the number. What happens? Quite frankly, I think the town council absolutely would overturn it and restore all of that money and overturn the will of the voters. And send it back to a second referendum. And at that point, I'm not going to have the political will or the energy to go on the campaign that I've been going on, the crusade I've been going on. And yes, it's a crusade. It's a proverbial crusade. I know people are going to purposely misinterpret that to be the most literal version of the word crusade. No, this is a proverbial crusade. You mean that as a clear euphemism and not as a literalism. And now I'm saying out loud, I mean that as a euphemism, not as a literalism. So when this gets taken out of context, you know that it's being taken out of context in bad faith. But I can't keep this up, especially if I'm going to be doing it alone. So when it comes time for a second referendum, if this thing fails, it may be a second referendum where what the number we're voting on is much higher than the number we're voting on in this tomorrow. And that would be against the will of the voters. And I don't know what to say. It could pass at that point. The machine could keep up the lobbying, could keep up, sending out these flyers and keep up the campaign of disinformation. I can't do that. I can't do it. And so, yes, I'm being very open. I'm sharing this publicly. You can't get more transparent than me saying that there is a strategy behind voting yes and behind me asking you guys, the taxpayers, to vote yes. But there's also a principle behind it, because I don't want you guys to be treated like ATMs, because you aren't, and you shouldn't be treated like ATMs. And I don't think I should be treated like an ATM. I think human beings, especially adult human beings, should be treated not like automatons whose sole existence is to spew out money, machine fed to, the infallible institutions of the teachers' unions and to the Board of Education. I don't believe any of that. I believe that you guys are individual human beings with agency. And I do not believe that individuals acting with agency as members of these institutions like the Board of Education and the teachers' unions are infallible. I don't believe that they exist on some higher moral and existential plane. I am not in a cult. And I think it's disgraceful that so many people in this town are treating, well, not really in this town, a lot of them don't live in this town, but they're treating you, the taxpayer here in New Milford, like an ATM. And that's just wrong. That's just end of story, plain and simple. That is wrong. And like I said, we've got a lawsuit coming, and now I can actually talk about that. Now I can share that because the whole thing has finally gone through. We've exhausted all of our. So we lost one of the cases. There were two defendants, and then in the 1980s who were. How do I put this? They were retried. They were tried in the 80s for murder. They were found guilty. They've been in prison for a very long time. They were retried with the emergence of new evidence, and their conviction was overturned. You could say that the result of the trial actions were that they were found, let's say, to have been wrongfully imprisoned. I won't say that because wrongful imprisonment is an actual criminal act, and I don't want to accuse anybody of that and get in trouble for making an accusation that isn't technically true. The two defendants, one of them settled with us last year, already taken care of. The other one didn't. The other one went to trial, and we lost the civil trial. And we had a judgment ruled against us of a little over $5 million. We exhausted the appeal process, and now it's over. And now with interest, we owe $7.5 million. So we somehow have to come up with $7.5 million. And at last week's town council meeting, the town council went into executive session to kind of discuss strategically what we would be looking at to make all of that happen. And after the town council came back from executive session, which is where they go behind closed doors so they're not revealing to the public legal strategy, right? They've decided to end the appeal process, and this is how they're going to pay this $7.5 million. So let's just go so we're going to watch this at 1.5 speed just so we can get through it quickly. It's about 4 minutes of video. We should be able to get through it in just, a little bit less time than that. I'll go through the meat of it briefly at the end. Guys, if it's too fast, let me know.
Item number 11, I'd like to move that we take action on the Birch versus Town of New Milford litigation.
The federal court judgment?
Federal court judgment, let me add that, right?
Thank you,
I
Katie.
need a second. Second, sorry.
Thank you. As far as kind of some background on where we are. In the 1980s, there was a case, Birch-Henning, against the state of Connecticut, which Randy, the state settled for how much did they settle for? $26 million. And then the town itself was under a lawsuit. For those that remember, we did settle the Henning case for 2.4, yep. So $2.5 million. What was left was the Birch case, of which the Birch case, the jury awarded $5.7 million. And then we had interest that was from the beginning of the court case, which bring the total number to $7,659,269. Though none of us here were involved in this case at all, none of us were on any of these boards. we still represent the town of New Milford, and the town of New Milford is obligated per the federal court judgment. So Randy, a federal court judgment, for those that may be watching tonight, that pretty much says you have to pay.
Yes, there's no option. You can't escape a judgment. It's mandatory.
Thank you. So the proposal to settle the $7,659,269 settlement would be as proposed. $3.5 million would come out of our unassigned fund. And speaking with Olga, our finance director, that would still keep us within the 2-month reserves that's required. $1 million would come out of our capital reserve fund. $500,000 would come out of our tax relief fund. And $2,659,269 would come out of the landfill settlement fund, which our town attorney had given to the Board of Finance concerning the available use of these funds for tax purposes. If this proposed settlement and the way we are paying it is approved by not only the town council here, but by the Board of Finance and then a town meeting, how this would be done, there would be no, if agreed, there would be no supplemental tax to our taxpayers. And I would remind the public at large is settling these two cases then puts us on a path forward. Though these are going to be a large hit to the town itself, we still have the availability and the funds to be able to do this again without going back to our taxpayers for additional funds. Any questions on the proposal? And we have a motion. Do we have a motion? And we have a second.
Yes.
Yep. All those in favor of the proposal?
Aye.
Any against? Any abstentions? Katie, I'd also like to ask, because we have to go through the process, this will go to the Board of Finance at their next meeting, which, Olga, is what date?
28.
If then we could set the town meeting.
June 9th, our first meeting of June, 6:15.
So I have a motion to set the town meeting that's required. Second. And we have a second from Mr. Scalia. All those in favor of the town meeting?
Aye.
Any opposed?
June 9th.
Any abstentions? I really want to thank our town council.
So there you have it. That's how we're going to ultimately pay all this off. You have the dates in front of you. You've seen it. Now, I think it's an incredibly noble endeavor to fund this by means that in a year, we're looking at a tax reval. In a year, we're looking at lost revenue on the car side of things. In a year where we are going to be facing a mill rate increase of 2.45 mils. It is a noble endeavor to say we're going to try to find a way to pay for all of this that doesn't involve charging the taxpayers any more money. Now, I'm going to throw out there that the suit that was filed by these two against the town of New Milford, we've talked about it on the show, was, in my opinion, utterly frivolous. And what must have happened is that their attorneys did what you should do as an attorney in 2025 and spent a ton of money, a ton of effort on jury selection. And they found a jury who, in a civil case, awarded, based on a preponderance of the evidence, because that's, the evidentiary standard in a civil trial. It's not, beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the evidentiary standard for a criminal trial. And for those of you who don't understand what I just said, welcome to 80% or more of people out there and likely what the jury was facing. Likely what you have is town of New Milford bad. This guy was in jail for a long time. The town of New Milford's role in all this was essentially nothing. It was the issue that was at hand was a failure of a state-appointed, we'll call him investigator, to engage in a way that was in accordance with perfectly in accordance with the law, let's say, with how that took place. So, yes, they did win. Birch won his case at trial, likely because they found a sympathetic jury and no other reason. And the award was nowhere near the amount that was being requested. Again, we've covered this on this show. So it is a noble endeavor to try to find a mechanism for paying this off that doesn't involve pitchforking the taxpayers and treating them like ATMs. Now, unfortunately, this is probably not an appropriate use of the landfill settlement funds. All of those other funding mechanisms, as far as I can tell, seem to be within, the rules and guidelines regarding how you can use those funds. So we've talked about on the show that, what is the proper role of government? And so many people, honestly, across the world, believe that the proper role of government is to just do good things. Is it a good thing to pay for this by just about whatever means possible that wouldn't involve leveraging the taxpayers any further than they're going to be leveraged this year anyway? Yes. But is it what government should be doing? Is it in keeping with the principles of a limited government? I don't know. Because we have the Landfill Settlement Fund ordinance right here. And we can talk about the purpose of and use of the fund. This is, again, all public information, links at the top of the screen. This is the latest version because it gets updated every once in a while. Let's zoom in just a little bit more so you guys can more easily follow along. Upon appropriation made in accordance with law, including the town charter and this article, the monies in the fund, so that would be the Landfill Settlement Fund, including any interest earned thereon, may be expended for the following purposes only, and they are enumerated. 1, the acquisition of land and buildings thereon for municipal public recreation purposes, public education purposes, or public library facilities. Is this an acquisition of land for any reason? No. 2, construction of municipal public recreation, educational facilities, or library facilities. Is this construction of any kind? Honestly, no. The acquisition of land and buildings thereon for open space. Is this an acquisition of land and buildings thereon of any kind? No. 4, the purchase or acquisition of development rights of farm and agricultural land. Is this the purchase or acquisition of development rights of anything? No. 5, the monies in the fund may be applied against the annual budget as follows. And then it shows the years for fiscal year 2002 to 2003 in an amount not to exceed 2.6 million. And then for 03 to 04, there's a number. 04 to 05, there's a number. 05 to 06, there's a number. And for fiscal years 06 to 07 through 23 to 24, in an amount not to exceed 10% of the total fund balance available as of July 1st of each fiscal year. The ordinance being introduced January 14th, 2002. So that means that we have to talk about money that was already allocated towards tax relief in those particular budget years. I don't know how this qualifies. I have no idea how this would qualify. We would definitely be spending the money in this year because it would be, the check would be written in this year. So that would be the allocation. It's coming out of the fund itself. So what fund was it allocated into if we're going to say it came from another fiscal year? Well, the answer is the Landfill Settlement Fund. An allocation into itself isn't an allocation. If you write yourself a check from a checking account and deposit that check directly into that checking account, nothing happens. There's no actual allocation in that regard. The check would be completely meaningless. It would do nothing. It wouldn't be a deposit into your account from your own account. It wouldn't function like that at all. The bank would take one look at it and say, okay, and nothing would happen. It would basically be a de facto voided check. It would be the same thing as a voided check, which isn't an allocation. So, this is a place where, again, I don't think that this is the appropriate way to spend this money because that's what the law says and that's what matters. Limited government requires this. So I do think it's a noble effort and a noble cause, but there's got to be some other way to do this. But this is what we're looking at, folks. This is why it's important to vote yes too high tomorrow. Because if the mill rate goes way up and we're going to spend way more money, it's going to have to go up even further. In all likelihood, when the Board of Finance led, by folks who are going to, in all likelihood, say, listen, I don't know if we can legally do this. We're going to come up with $2.6 million somewhere, and we have a limited time to come up with that by law. And for those who are saying that, it's Pete Bass's fault because he should have planned ahead and set up an account specifically for this, that's just dumb. You can't do that. You can't do that because then what's going to happen in a civil trial is the litigant is going to leverage that information against you. They're going to say, oh, look, they already set up a fund knowing they're going to lose. They know they're wrong. What do you think? How do you think a jury's going to respond to that? Oh, well, yeah. They set up the fund. They know they're wrong. They know they're going to lose this case. So, that's just a de facto admission of guilt. So no, you can't do that. It would be legally stupid to do that. Now, you can do some very creative things, but it would be legally stupid to do that. Now, in my opinion, one of the ways you could do this is say, we're going to just spend the money. We're just going to spend the money. It's not on the budget line. We got to just spend the money, right? And we're just going to spend it. And at the end of the year, you say to the taxpayers, there's going to be basically no surplus. Because every year for the last several years, the municipal side of the budget has had several $1 million in surplus. And you know what? I'm sorry, but like no toys this year. None. And I realize that these toys are maybe needed toys, necessary toys, but no stuff. You don't get any stuff. And this is it's something that Joe DeGuru and I have been talking about endlessly on the show, is the surpluses over the last 5 years when it comes to the municipal side of the budget. With the Board of Ed too, but at the same time, here's the deal. All of this surplus money, the only way you're going to be able to pay for this, in my opinion, without leveraging the taxpayers any further than they've already been leveraged and are likely going to be leveraged, would be to do something like that and say, listen, we don't have the money. We don't have the money for any trucks, any lawnmowers, any heavy equipment. You know, we don't have the money to buy the Board of Ed more equipment. We just don't have it. We just don't have it. It sucks. We just don't have it. End of story. And it is wrong to say, well, taxpayers, fork over more money. Push the button, get the money. Push the button, get the money. Push the button, get the money. We're not ATMs. And that is a disgusting way to treat people. And that's the whole reason why I started this whole thing about vote yes tomorrow. And again, I'll be voting yes too high tomorrow because I do give one shake about the taxpayers, and I do think it's disgusting to treat them like ATMs. And so I hope I'll see a whole lot of you outside tomorrow, pulling that booth, pulling that lever, and I think I've made that case as much as I can. All that's left for tomorrow is voting. And with that said, we're at an hour. I really don't want this thing to go this long. But I promised I'd get to your questions, so let me see what we have here in the chat. I'll start off on YouTube. How about this high fives? I'm blocked. Yeah, everybody seems to be blocked from these groups. And they keep talking about things that interested in it. The landfill settlement fund. This is on YouTube. The landfill settlement fund should be used for anything outside of the usage specified in. Should not be used for anything outside of the usage specified in the ordinance. Well, not only should it not, I don't think it would even be legal to do that. So yes, of course not. A limited government means you have limitations on those governments, and the government has to abide by those limitations. Now, if the ordinance is going to be amended, we can amend the ordinance. I don't know if I would be keen on that, since the ordinance was there for a very specific reason. Now that reason originated in 2002, when population and growth trends were not what they are in this town, and when tax rates were not what they are in this state and town. So, maybe it's time to amend the ordinance. I don't know. The point is, right now, I don't think this is an appropriate use. The problem, Mike, is that there's no such thing as a carryover appropriation. If the funds were never taken, the appropriation dies with the fiscal period it associated with. Yeah, this is what I was saying, right? If there's no actual check written, then there was no actual allocation. If there was no transfer of funds to a different account, there was no allocation. So this would just be spending completely off budget. Surplus could have been put in unassigned, right? Yes, it could have. And you could have just said, so here's how you would have creatively saved up for something like this by using the unassigned fund. Connecticut's losing population. There's all this, economic turmoil taking place in this state. And we can't just be prepared for a rainy day. We can't just meet the mere threshold that gets us in terms of the unassigned fund. You don't want to just have the bare minimum to qualify us for a AAA rating. The only town in Litchfield County, by the way, that has a AAA bond rating, the highest bond rating you can possibly get for all intents and purposes. The federal government is an outlier for that. But you say, listen, we may have a rainy day here, and you've got to be super ambiguous about it and say, we're just over preparing for a rainy day. And then you would just take everything out of the unassigned fund for all intents and purposes. So yeah, you could have like I said, there's creative ways to save for it, but a lot of people are saying in town, we should have set up a fund specifically for this and said, we're going to lose this. No, you can't do that. That's just stupid. That's just incredibly legally stupid. Like, not even law school. This is like undergrad law courses and procedures 101. You can't do that. You can't squirrel away money specifically for that publicly and put it on the public record, which is what the town would have to do in that case. All right, on Facebook. We need numbers tomorrow. We sure do. We sure do. Okay, so this is a long one. We'll come back to that. So another reason that folks should be migrating over to YouTube is because the comment section on Facebook is a bear to read live. It jumps around on me for no great reason. It's the way it sorts the comments isn't based on most recent. It moves comments around. When people respond to, I'm going to name some names here. So Ray's in the chat and Andrea's in the chat. If Andrea were to respond to Ray's comment, it doesn't show up, as being a response to Ray's comment on my end. It looks terrible from my end. So it's really hard to follow your commentary on Facebook. So I appreciate it, but long-term, we got to start migrating over to YouTube, at least until we find a better alternative. I don't like YouTube all that much either because of certain other reasons, but that we've talked about in the show. But it is certainly a better UI, at least, than Facebook. Okay, so this is from Mike. I'm going to say Boucher. I'm pretty sure his family pronounces it Boucher. So I would love if Mike, if you wanted to chime in, if his family is pronouncing it Boucher because it looks like a French name, I think. I would love for this community to pull together and start pronouncing his name the way his family pronounces it, Boucher. I don't know. I think it's a fair request. Was it ever determined that they were innocent or just that they were wrongfully convicted? So this is going to get into some legalese. I'm going to try to keep this as simple as I can. They didn't truly file for mere wrongful conviction. Damages were awarded because of actions contained within a claim of wrongful conviction. But it's not as straightforward as that alone. And we'll just leave it at that. Either is okay from Mike. Okay. All right. Okay. So we're going to try to I'm going to read this before I read it out loud. Okay. So I hope that there is. So Elizabeth, I'm going to read this, but I want folks to know that this sentence starts with but also, and this is what I keep talking about with Facebook. I imagine this is not Elizabeth's first comment. So again, I'm trying to read them in the order you guys sent them to me, but this is going to be kind of difficult because Facebook's UI isn't great. But also, once the people passing out brochures were asked to stop, they did. Why would they even think to do that, though, in the first place? That's the question at hand here. Why would they even think to do that? And we made sure everyone knew not to pass out flyers anymore. But again, who would even think to do that? It's very disheartening to hear you assuming what all the teachers are saying are wrong. We are thinking about the quality of education our students deserve. This is why, Elizabeth, this is why I keep referring to the movement itself and the thing behind the movement. And this is why I'm not referring to individual teachers, because individual teachers may not be merely monetarily interested parties. But the class, which is what we're referring to, the class of people are necessarily interested. They're employed. They have a paycheck directly from all of this. That's a necessarily interested position. And the unions behind them have a necessarily interested position. And their interest is not in higher quality education. It's not in, the students themselves. It's not in the kids. It's in protecting the teachers and their jobs, regardless of any other consideration. That's the primary motivation of collective bargaining agents. Excuse me, not the units, the agents. That's why you collectively bargain, is to bargain as the collective. And in this case, against us, the taxpayers, and our interests. That's definitionally the case. This is why I remember I've been extremely careful about my language. I always am. I'm curious why you're mainly focused on the school budget and not the town side additionally. So I've talked about this endlessly on the show. I'm going to answer this question one last time, and I'm sorry, but Elizabeth, I've told this to you on multiple occasions in our engagements on Facebook. The reason is because the fire hose of disinformation is coming from that side. We're not getting a whole lot of disinformation from the municipal side. And I've been very public about my opposition to the idea that I've been very public about the idea that the mayor's proposal should have been reduced beyond what the town council did. I said that publicly on the record at the Board of Finance deliberations and public comment. On the public record, I captured that video and I shared it on my channel. I put together my speech on my Facebook page and shared it on my channel as a downloadable, printable Google document that anyone could view. I've done this a million times. I have been very public about my position on the municipal side of the budget, that both of these things are going to have to be reduced from the mayor's proposal and by more than the amount that the town council reduced them by in terms of their proposals, in order to get to what I thought was a more reasonable increase in the mill rate, which was one that should ostensibly, and I think this is a good principle, rule of thumb, or heuristic at least to rely on, that the mill rate increases should be at most something of a reflection of CPI. That's the highest increase that they should realistically be, because that's ostensibly what the taxpayers can afford, unless we have a complete change in the economic demographics of the people that make up this town, which you would see in the grand list in the first place. Haven't been following the budget issues in Sherman, Brookfield, or Region 12. Did they have large portions of their budget removed? So New Fairfield is probably the better comp here, because New Fairfield is, of the towns that surround us, I'd say New Fairfield and Bethel are probably the ones that are closest to New Milford on a lot of demographical considerations. Brookfield is much, much smaller in population, and that population's a bit more dense than New Milford. So Newtown is probably closer, but again, on economics, they're not really a good one-to-one match for New Milford. So locally, I would say, New Fairfield's a pretty good comp. And what happened in New Fairfield is they were looking at a near double-digit mill rate increase, and the taxpayers shot that down. And they said, no, we can't do this. We can't do this. And so they're going to a second budget referendum, and their number is going to have to go down. So that's what we're seeing around the state, is like 8+% increases, 8-point mill rate increases across the state. If you go down to the Gold Coast, there are places where it's double digits. And I'm sorry, but we just can't afford this in this town. We can't afford it. I run a small business. I rent out a 1-bedroom apartment. I've been very public about the fact that, I live extremely within my means, and that means is not significant. Honestly curious, because if they didn't, then the union wouldn't need help with teachers being laid off. No, it's because the union said they were going to target 3 or 4 towns, and that's what they targeted. We covered that in this show. They specifically targeted New Milford. It had nothing necessarily to do with the layoffs themselves, so much as they were looking for towns to go on these campaigns, and the layoffs did happen in this town before they picked us as a campaigning location. But remember, they already had this in mind. They were already going to do all of this. And the layoffs that are happening in Stanford are nothing. It's a trickle even compared to us, and Stanford was one of the target zones. In the end, what Joe DiGregorio's proposed amendment might do is, and this has now been made public, at most 14 teachers. And I'm sorry, but again, the teachers are not some sort of higher creature. They are not some sort of infallible being that exists on a higher moral and existential plane. They're human beings. And if if my customers just simply can't afford to have me mow their lawn, then they can't afford it. And if the taxpayers just simply can't afford to keep up the number of teachers in the system, then they just can't afford it. End of story. I think the real question that I would love to see, I'm going to name Elizabeth Holton by name. I would love to see Elizabeth Holton raise this question because this is the more important question. Why is it that the teachers that, if they're going to be laid off, are going to be laid off, not strictly based on merit? That should be the only factor. And it's just not going to be the case. It's not going to be a matter of peer review, which is an excellent way to determine educational outcomes, is by peer review. The teachers know who the great teachers are. The teachers know who the bad teachers are. And that isn't to, and I'll come right out and say it. There are bad teachers. There's 320 teachers. That's more teachers than I had during peak, which is basically during peak enrollment. Just before that peak. And I'm sorry, but they were bad teachers when I was in high school, when I was in middle school, when I was in elementary school, because we didn't have an intermediate school at that point, here in New Milford. You can't tell me that there isn't at least one bad teacher of those 320-ish. It's just, the odds are stacked phenomenally against that. So the real question is, why can't we do things like the metrics, which we don't even know. The Board of Ed has been asked about outcome metrics for years. And it's just for all intents and purposes refused to quantize them. Because here's what you could do. You could look at what we're paying a teacher, and we could say, what are the outcome metrics? And we could say, the teacher that we're paying, let's say $70,000 a year, which is kind of on the lower end, based on data that was publicly available and released by Hearst Media, $70,000 is, in terms of the total payout, is kind of on the lower end, and that doesn't include the benefits and the secondary payments. If we've got great outcomes, then that teacher should stay. And if we got somebody that we're paying, $120,000 to, which would be on the extreme high end of that, based on data publicly released by Hearst Media, well, that teacher better have the best outcomes and by a decent margin. And if they don't, that's the first one that should be going. So it shouldn't even be strict merit. It should be relative merit. Like what it's costing us to get that outcome. But we can't do that. We can't do that. And the answer, the question I wish that, Elizabeth, I really wish you would ask, we really wish you would be asking is that, why is it that terminations are going to be done for all intents and purposes strictly based on tenure and not based on merit? Because I think when you get to the answer that question, which we've answered on this show many times, I think you're going to get to the heart of the issue here and why it is that I've been focusing my attention on what I've been focusing my attention on this entire time. And I think if you're willing to engage in good faith, I think that's all I have to say about that. And that's how I want to engage with this community, because I love this town. And I think, generally speaking, the people of this town, for the most part, are people who agree with me that adults can disagree on politics. And I hope that however you vote tomorrow, it's really only one side that does this. It's really only, and it's not even the majority of that side here in town. I voted for Lisa Hida. She's a Democrat. I wrote in Bill Dahl as a Democrat, right? I voted for Democrats in the past. I would like to continue to vote for Democrats in the past, in the future in this town. I've been public about the fact I'm not a registered Republican, no matter how much pressure I've been under to re-register as a Republican, and I'm just not. And if I were to ever run for public office here in this town, I would run as what I am, because it's the most honest thing to say, and that is as a libertarian. I know I just pissed off a lot of the audience, but that's just the most honest way to do things. And I think this community could get behind that. I think this community, generally speaking, has a very quiet super majority that wouldn't act in a disgraceful manner that a tiny portion of this town would, because of how people might vote in this town. And so, with that said, I'm going to be public. I'll be voting yes, too high on both halves of the budget. I hope you will too. Thanks so much to the community and for everyone who's been following all of this. Thanks so much, especially to the people who have stuck their necks out and taken those signs from me and put them in their yards. Thanks so much for everyone who's been following along on all of this. I really hope to get back to the Sunday schedule. There's some news to go over potentially that goes beyond the budget. Here in town, we hopefully, like I said, we'll get back to the Sunday night thing so that I'm not having to do this on the same day that I'm doing landscaping work and trying to keep up with getting checks to the bank and stuff. Again, I always do this at the end of the show, and I'm going to continue to do this as long as I have this show. For everyone who watches this live and who watches this after the fact, I do this for you, and to you I'm eternally grateful. I'll see you guys tomorrow, hopefully out while we're out. With all that said, good night, everyone. We'll see you on the other side.